Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 345, and today's date is April 19th, 2014. And the title of this episode is The Current Economic Collapse News Brief for this Saturday. Before I get started, I just want to say thank you to those people who donated to the X22Report.com site. I really do appreciate it. Thank you very much. I am very grateful. Those people who are new to X22 Report, and you subscribe to YouTube, if you've never visited the site, you can come on over. I do put many different things on the site. I have Sentinel alerts. I comment on them pretty much every day. I have the timeline, a high-level view of the economic collapse, a timeline of this, and you can take a look at that. And I'm updating it slowly but surely with new information. I track products for inflation, deflation, and we do have the forum, and it's completely free. You can go over. It's called The People. There's a link right on top, and you can read what everyone's saying. If you're a little hesitant about signing up, that's not a big deal. Take your time, read what people are saying, and if you'd like to sign up, it is completely free. Just need your username and email, and you are ready to go. And the username could be anything. It could be anything you want to be called or anything like that. And again, it is completely free to everybody. Pretty much all that I'm doing is free to everyone, and this is for everyone to use. Let's get into the economic collapse news. We understand out in Cyprus, and the corporate media and everyone's trying to make it seem like everything's all better. The capital controls are coming up this spring in May, will be completely gone, and we'll have to see if that actually happens, because they've said this many times before during the whole year of 2013, and nothing has ever happened. Here we are in the spring. They said late May they're going to remove all capital controls, and we'll see if they actually do this. But Cyprus has been hit very hard, and I understand, we all understand that they're getting bailouts and they had bail-ins where they took the people's money. But what we're seeing now is people really don't have work. Unemployment is continually rising. And right now, the Register of Companies has been reported as saying that 1 in 4 construction firms in Cyprus are going bankrupt due to the pressure caused by the island's financial crisis. So they are having a very rough time making ends meet, and this crisis is nowhere over. Just like in Greece, when they received the first bailout, everyone thought, oh, it's all over, everything's great. It is not done. This is going to wreak havoc on the people, because as they take on more debt and they have to implement austerity, we're going to see a lot more businesses close, we're going to see a lot more people out of work, and all of a sudden we're going to see unemployment continually rise. And this is what we've been seeing, and this does not stop. It continually gets worse. I mean, Spain, they're saying it's going to take a decade for unemployment to get better. Greece, they're not seeing any improvement whatsoever. Actually, it is getting worse. Now, what's very interesting, and I talk about how we're headed towards this economic collapse, and I report on it every day about real estate, retail, and pretty much everything else about unemployment and people losing and getting laid off. But what's very interesting, and I understand the elections are coming up, and I am not for Republic or Democrat. I could care less. I am for the people, and this is what everyone should be for. I mean, it feels like these two groups kind of divide us. I rather us come together. But right now, before the elections, they are saying that the Democrats should not discuss the economic recovery. It's a political loser. And that should tell us something. That should tell us that there really isn't an economic recovery. And this goes on to say, as a start, Democrats should bury any mention of the recovery. That message was tested and it lost. Why? Because the real everyday person who is out there understands it is very hard for them to make ends meet. It is difficult for them to survive. It is very hard to find jobs. And yes, you can find jobs, but they are low-paying jobs. And this continues, skip over how much trouble people are in, and it doesn't convince them that policymakers really understand or even focusing on the problems they continue to face. Many of the jobs that have been created are low-paying than the ones that preceded them. How interesting, because this is what we've been saying all along. The jobs that are created now are lower level jobs. They do not have the same pay. They do not have the same quality of jobs. They are part-time or lower level jobs that people are getting at this time. And we have to look at this because we are seeing that these huge companies, Barclays, RPS, Bank of America, JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, I mean, they're laying off thousands upon thousands, Dell, Sony. Where are all these people going to find work? It is going to be very difficult. They're going to find lower level work, and those big houses that they have, or those houses that they're trying to support, those are going to go into foreclosure because the jobs that they're getting will not be able to support this. And we saw this happen during 2007, coming into 2008. I reported on that the median income is continually falling. Prices, inflation is going up, and this is not a good mixture for anything turning out well for any of us, because as your salary goes down and energy and food continually rises and other products, it continually rises, we know there is something wrong. And this went on to say that a message about the benefits of recovery doesn't really reflect their lives currently. And of course it doesn't, because we understand this recovery is a complete illusion. It is fake. It is made up. It is made up with manipulated numbers in GDP, unemployment, inflation, and now the Census Bureau is going to manipulate Obamacare to make that look better. This whole thing was completely created to convince the majority of the people that everything is fine, and this is why they had to continually pump up the stock market to make everyone believe that we were in some type of recovery. And this happened back in 1929 and prior to 2008, where the stock market was hitting all-time new highs. People believed that everything was fine. They believed what the Fed was saying. They believed what the government was saying. And then all of a sudden, everything just came crashing down. The same thing's going to happen here, and they know it. They understand what is happening. Okay. Now, Obama just signed the terrorist activity law aimed at barring Iranian UN envoy. And what is really happening here, and this reminds me of the NDAA, it seems like anyone that they want to say is a terrorist or had terrorist activities, they don't want them becoming a UN envoy at this time, and they put this law into place, not just for Iran, but I think for many other countries. I think they were using Iran to get this going because they Washington understands that most of the people in Washington fear Iran. They fear that they're going to attack the United States with a nuclear weapon. They fear that they're going to do some type of terrorist act. And again, Iran hasn't attacked anyone in the last 200 years. They haven't bombed anyone. They haven't attacked anyone. They've never used terrorist activities in the United States or pretty much anywhere else at this point. So really what we're looking at, I believe they used this Iran envoy who was involved in the coup in Iran in 1979 to remove the private Western central bankers and to remove the United States from there because they didn't want them controlling the money supply in the country anymore. And they are using this to apply to every other country because as time goes on, they're going to say, you know what, this Russian UN envoy we do not want, he's a terrorist. This North Korean is a terrorist, and I think this is what they're going to start doing, and this is why they wanted this law passed. Now, I've discussed this in many reports, and we understand that the United States, the central bankers, love to slowly take away our rights, and they do this one step at a time so you really can't notice it happening. And what we're seeing that they are taking away our rights very slowly. They make it seem like they're trying to help us when they really aren't. I'll give you an example. The Clive and Bundy crisis that was happening in Nevada. They set up the First Amendment or the free speech area, and they're slowly trying to convince us that this is for our safety. This is the area that you need to go on. And soon they'll say, well, you know what? In this entire area, there is no free speech. You have to go to the next state. And they do this very slowly, very incrementally. And what we're seeing is that a lot of our rights have been taken away. And if we look at this, the federal government has set up its secret FISA courts to rubber stamp NSA surveillance. According to data obtained by the Electronic Privacy Information Center, of the nearly 34,000 surveillance requests made to FISA courts in the last 35 years, only 11 have been rejected. Unsurprising, given the FISA courts only hear the case from the government's perspective. It is literally a one-sided argument in FISA courts, hardly an impartial hearing. So we can see right now, they don't hear from any other side except themselves, and this is why every single one of them pretty much gets approved. The concept of innocent until proven guilty may officially exist in courts, but administratively it was thrown out long ago. These days, there are hundreds of local, state, federal agencies that can confiscate your assets, levy your bank account, and freeze you out of your life savings. None of this requires a court order, and you did not go to court. You didn't have a trial. They just took what they wanted. And the last here, the attorney-client privilege is a long-standing legal concept which ensures that communication between an attorney and his or her client is completely private. In Upjohn versus United States, the Supreme Court itself held attorney-client privileges as necessary to encourage full and frank communication between attorneys and their clients and thereby promote broader public interest in the observance of law. It doesn't matter what you're accused of, theft, treason, triple homicide. With very limited exception, an attorney cannot be compelled to testify against the client, nor can their communication be subpoenaed for evidence. Yet, in United States Tax Court decision announced on Wednesday, the court dismissed attorney-client privilege, stating that when a person puts into issue his subjective intent in deciding how to comply with the law, he may forfeit the privilege afforded attorney-client communications. In other words, if a person works with legal counsel within the confines of the tax code to legitimately minimize the amount of taxes owed, that communication is no longer protected by attorney-client privilege. So we can see right now that they are slowly removing our rights. I mean, they did it with the Patriot Act, they did it with NDAA, now they're doing it with the constitutional free zones that is 100 miles in from the border of the United States. They're bringing up the Real ID, where they're going to have checkpoints, where they want all your information shared with Canada and Mexico, and it will be shared in the federal database. We can see the courts, the FISA courts, and the other courts that they can just freeze your assets whenever they want without a court order or take your assets. And we are seeing this slowly being put on the people, and this is the way the government does it. It's a very slow process. They do it incrementally so no one notices, but when you look back, you say, oh my God, what just happened? Now, we understand in Ukraine they had this de-escalation, and I talked about this quite a bit now. And what we are seeing is nothing that looks like a de-escalation. I mean, let's look at this. We have the protesters in Donetsk and other regions who occupy the government buildings. We had Ukraine come in with tanks and helicopters and planes and armed individuals into the area. The United States says they're going to be placing more sanctions on Russia and Crimea, and more sanctions are on the way. We have the CIA director in Ukraine right now planning and maneuvering the next attack on the people in the government buildings. We see NATO moving equipment and military assets and bringing more in. So where is the de-escalation? I don't see it. And right now, the EU, the opposition leader has called on the European Union to impose more sanctions on Russia in the event of what she called Moscow's disregard of its commitments under a new international deal on Ukraine. Tymoshenko also noted that the EU leaders are expected to gather on April 24th to slap the third level of sanctions on Moscow if the Russian troops, which there aren't Russian troops, they are allowed to be in Crimea because it's now with Russia. They don't believe it's with Russia. They still think it's with Ukraine, but those troops are there. They have a base there. There are no troops being built up on the borders. There's no troops in Donetsk. And of course, they're continually using this propaganda to convince people. But what I'm seeing NATO maneuvering. I see more troops being spread around. Now, U.S. is going to deploy troops to Poland. Poland and the United States will announce next week the deployment of U.S. ground forces to Poland as part of an expansion of NATO, and they're bringing in at least, or I think it's around 10,000 troops into this area. There will also be intensified cooperation in air defense, special forces, cyber defense, and other areas. Poland will play a leading regional role under U.S. patronage. So we can see that this is not being de-escalated. And now let me just say this. When a country continually brings in more military assets, when a country continually brings in more troops and puts it in Poland, puts it in Romania, brings ships into the Black Sea, enhances the missile shield in Poland down to Romania, this is not a peaceful de-escalation. This is a slow buildup of troops over weeks and months. This leads to war. This does not lead to peace. And what we're seeing is that the U.S. may adjust its missile defense in Europe. Amid rising tensions with Russia, the U.S. defense chief said Washington and its allies may adjust the timing for fielding anti-missile systems in Europe. The secretary has also emphasized that the U.S. missile defense system in Europe, though, are not a threat to Russia. So they're saying that they do have the U.S. missile defense system in Europe, but it's really not pointing to Russia, which we know it really is. They have it there for North Korea, they had it there for Iran, and for Russia. This is why this system was set up. Now, Senator Corker is out there, and he's saying it's time to consider sending weapons to Ukraine. Well, I'm going to say most likely they are already being maneuvered and placed into Ukraine. And this is being covertly done. That's why the CIA is there. They did the same thing in Syria. They had other factions do this for the United States, so United States couldn't be implicated in it. The CIA is directing the whole entire operation, and this is what's happening right now. And Corker goes on to say, it is time for the United States to provide lethal weapons for Ukraine's military. And he said that it's time for us to consider anti-tank weaponry, anti-aircraft weaponry, rather than wait for a Russian invasion of eastern Ukraine to implement additional sanctions, which seems to be U.S. policy at the moment. We must take action now that will help prevent this worst-case scenario before it becomes a reality. So all of the government officials right now are banging their chests for war. They are getting ready, set up for war. And let me just say this. If they really want to go to war and they are ready to go to war, you know what? They should be on the front line. We should have the president, all these senators and congressmen, give them the rifle, give them their military outfit, put them on the front line, and let them lead the charge in, just like real leaders would normally do. Instead of hiding behind their desk and their computers while our children go overseas and fight, let them be on the front lines if they're really calling for war. We can send them in with airplanes, they can jump out, parachute down, they can set the stage and let us know how it's going. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.